Hello and welcome to Glitch Cube, we're a gaming podcast where each week we take a deeper look into the art of video games. As always, I'm Christian.
I'm Chris.
And this week we are battling our own intro here. So Roger Ebert, who is a critically acclaimed critic for film, cinema, art, all those fun things, he came out with a statement in 2010 that kind of shook the gaming industry as a whole. And it made people really start to question these things, which I think is a very fascinating thing. But what he said is that games cannot be art. That in our lifetime, we will never be able to equate a game to what we would consider like a masterpiece, right? And I think that is such a backwards, horrible way of thinking about things. The exact thing that he said was, let's see real quick. Yeah, no one in or out of the field has ever been able to cite a game worthy of comparison with the great poets, filmmakers, novelists, and poets. Which he said poets twice in his quote, which I think is kind of funny. So obviously he's not paying attention. But Ebert also wrote that an immersive game without points or rules, but I would say then it ceases to be a game and becomes a representation of a story. So he has a lot of thoughts behind this, and he actually received quite a bit of backlash for this. And spoiler alert, I disagree with this 100%. I think we both do, right? This is not the case. And we do have to remember that this was written in 2010, where maybe the games that came out, and we can kind of discuss what games were coming out around that time, were some of the bigger ones that would have made it to Ebert's eyes. And maybe that's why he went to this conclusion. But it is kind of interesting to think that some designers themselves also hold this idea or think that this statement is true. And to a certain extent, it can be true if you look at it from one specific viewpoint, where if you look at it where games need to have a set of rules, there needs to be a point system, and there needs to be a central goal at the end, like one central goal at the end, then I can kind of see where you might say that games cannot be art. But to say that all games cannot be art and that we will, in our lifetime, we will not see anything that would even constitute as art or even should be even thought about that way, I think is completely wrong and backwards. And it is frustrating to hear it, because he was reached out to by a lot of people who disagreed with the statement, and they sent him long lists of games that were coming out around that time or came out in the past, and he disregarded everything that they said. He basically said that I don't have time to dig into all this stuff, and there's no way that any of them are going to change his mind anyway, which I think is such a very narrow-viewed way of looking at this. Why make that kind of a statement against an entire industry if you're not willing to do a little bit of research behind it first or even after the fact? The most he did was make another article responding to his original quote and responding to some of the people that he said had the better version of an argument. And some of the games that were brought up, I would say, are not good examples of it, which I think is tough. And it does kind of suck, right? That does happen. But at least one of the games that he does bring up in his follow-up article, we have discussed this game in the past, and it is a game, or like I would consider it a work of art game, right? But you can tell by the way he writes about it, he didn't look into the game at all. He just watched the example that was given to him, basically a trailer probably, or some still frames, and didn't bother doing any research into it, which is, I think, a horrible way of starting an argument, right? Like, how can you not be open-minded to this? Like, I feel like to kind of like open it up even further, I mean, with our other show, Murder of Grey, we do this a lot where we have one side of the argument. Like, every time we bring up a question in that show, like, we instantly have a response to it, right? But we try and do our due diligence and look at it from the other side as well, right? Try and bring in, how can someone rationally think about this? Because I feel like it's so important to do that. we live in a world where there's going to be people who think the exact opposite of you, and we're supposed to coexist. We're supposed to live together side by side. So you need to know where someone else is coming from. You need to have that sort of empathy to put yourself in someone else's shoes. And to completely disregard something is so arrogant and egotistical that it really is kind of frustrating that someone like Roger Ebert, who is he's on, like, I mean, I've known his name since I was a child, right? And it's kind of upsetting that this guy is so renowned for his writings, where he can basically make or break a movie, a piece of art, or anything like that. And he completely tore down the gaming industry with one simple statement like that. And how can you take any of his words seriously if he's not willing to listen to the other side of the argument? That's my big issue here. I don't know. It's really frustrating.
It's weird. For the longest time, I always heard people like kind of have that same thought where, games aren't art. And it's understandable, especially 2010, like the big games, the only ones like Mass Effect, all that stuff, great games. But at the end of the day, they are games, right? While they have a cool story, not too much before that time will really be considered like, oh, this would be great in like an art museum. Like there were masterpieces before it. You go back to JRPGs, you go back to like 90s, Super Nintendo, like there's beautiful and great stories told in those games, but nothing is really like art housey. And the art house games that were released throughout time usually aren't really games. They're more like interactive art, I guess you could call. Like, I look at, there was like the Waco one, there's a Columbine one, there's ones where it's like, oh, this is, you play out the events and you make it all artistic. And I'm like, could you really consider that a game, or would you call it an interactive movie?
Or just an interactive warning, or like a PSA, right? Like that to me is more on the level of like a PSA.
And that's when I looked up like art house games, a lot of them were games like that, where it was like warning or something like that, or a play on like a modern issue, which, it's great that people have, try to get their ideas out there like that, but it's using like a game engine as an art style, which I know that there is a term for that. I think it's machinima.
Oh, machinima?
Machinima, yeah. Wow, I really butchered that word. But I mean, that's something different. But
yeah, that's taking a like a gaming system or a game itself and bending it to create a different source of media, right? Like, for those, I mean, like Red vs. Blue, right? Probably, I think it was the first machinima or first mainstream machinima that got out there, where they took Red vs. Blue or they took Halo itself and just put voice actors over it and enacted these scenes within the game itself. So, like they took that media and warped it into what could be considered an art form, instead of having the game be the art. Yeah.
Like, it's interesting because I tried to really look through kind of what people consider artists in the gaming world, which, nowadays I would say there's a good list of developers and writers who I could see being considered, an auteur, I guess you would call it, right? And will the gaming world ever have a Picasso or Van Gogh that's a big enough name where even, sports chads or normies would know the name, even though they don't play games? Maybe, maybe not. I'm going to go with maybe not, unless the scene changes. And I felt at first maybe that's what Ebert thought, was that these game creators, their names are not going to be used in everyday talk when someone sees a weird face painting and they're like, man, that's like some Picasso kind of thing, right? Like, we're not just going out there throwing like, oh, this is a Nintendo thing. I mean,
right. It's not going to be like, when you describe something as like Lovecraftian, right? Like, or
yeah.
like a Shakespearean style play. Like it might, maybe eventually, like there's a few developers that I think could break those bounds, like Kojima, right? Like I could
Mm-hmm.
see Kojima being one of the first names that is so well known out there, like as far as like designers go.
They which actually was another thing I was going to get into. Like, so a lot of people consider Kojima as kind of the first auteur when it comes to games, and I think if you want to consider games as art, it's very easy to do if you're in the gaming ecosystem, right? So, like, for all of us that play games or enjoy games, it's easy for us to hear a name and be like, oh, they're perfect. Whatever they touch is just art. Like, it's easy for us to see it, but when people outside of the gaming world hears these names, it doesn't ring a bell, right? Because, well, it not everyone plays games, whereas like art or music is kind of everywhere. Even movies, more people are willing to give a movie a try and not a game, just because you don't know how to. You don't have to know how to play a game to enjoy, like a movie.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a weird comparison, and I can kind of get why he says it, but the problem is that you could consider a lot of these other things as not art either, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like movies or music, even though we all know they're art, to not call games art either is kind of dumb.
Well, like to that point as well, is most of those artists were not considered valid artists during their time.
Yeah,
They were only considered artists like far after their time. Like if you look at like artists like Man Ray, like his art was shunned. Like he was actually like kicked out of galleries. He couldn't get a showing anywhere. And his stuff was looked at as like him putting garbage in the galleries themselves because it wasn't the stereotypical art form, right? Same thing with Van Gogh. Van Gogh was not a successful painter. He didn't sell a single painting while he was alive. His paintings only sold and became popular after the fact, right? Like it's the same thing with a lot of writers too. Like this, it happens. They don't reach critical acclaim until far after they're no longer, practicing their art form. And I think that's the big thing here too, to think about. Like gaming is still fairly new, where a lot of the original designers are still alive to this day, right?
Yep.
Where they can theoretically keep designing, keep creating, and some of them are. But once we lose, I'm not trying to put this out into the ecosystem or out in the universe, but like when Kojima does pass away, right? Like we will not get another Kojima game. And then that is whenever we're going to reach critical acclaim with his style, because he has a very particular style that like you just know whenever you play it, or for those who have experienced his style of games. So like I think that's whenever we're going to start seeing it, maybe in like 20, 30 years, when some of these great designers of our time are no longer there to actually design anymore. Then people are going to start saying like, oh, I was heavily inspired by the work of X, right? And that's whenever they're going to start being remembered for what they did. And with gaming becoming more part of the mainstream, I feel like that is going to be more and more of a thing, right? Where now even colleges are recognizing esports as a valid sport, or they're even trying to get into talks with the NCAA. And this is a topic for some other time because I've been doing a lot of research into this. But like, I feel like once that happens, like you can get a scholarship with it now, right? Like you can get a scholarship for games. So like, I feel like it's reaching that mainstream avenue where now that's going to be considered art. Like, think about not that long ago, comic books were looked at as garbage, right? By the mainstream, most people. But now comic books are gold and they are art forms, and the artists are being remembered for the work that they put in for all those years without recognition now, right? So it's the same process. It's the same thing that we're going through. And it's actually really fascinating because most of these things, we weren't alive to watch that transformation, that growth. And we're seeing it now. We're able to live through this. And probably in our lifetime, we'll be able to see the creation of games, the shunning of games, the acceptance of them, and then the acceptance of them as being a true art form. Like, that's fascinating, and that's super exciting, and it's actually really cool to be able to see history unfold like that in front of us, and to realize that we are living through this right now. How cool is that? It's actually pretty exciting when you think about it.
I mean, I think it's interesting. You know, it's like, yeah, we could get into all these other like scenes of art that have been around forever, but like with games, it's like, you know, it's still so young. Even though it's been around for decades, it's just getting to the point now where a lot of games either don't feel like games or don't look like it, or they're just different, right? They're not your typical arcade games anymore, right? It's not your stupid, you know, Asteroids or Pac-Man. No disrespect to those games, you know, they're classics, but they've evolved since then.
But they're not like a typical game. Yeah.
Yeah. And, you know, thinking back to Kojima, there's so many other like kind of big, I don't want to say huge names, but there's people that make things that in the gaming ecosystem masterpieces. You know, you look at Shigeru Miyamoto with like Mario, you look at Miyazaki for like the Souls games, even like Suda51 with his own kind of art style, and
or then, Ueda for Shadow Colossus and Ico, and, right? Like, and just his general thought behind gaming, like.
And like in here in the US, we got like Tim Schafer with like Grim Fandango, Psychonauts, like his artistic Tim Burton style.
Or even like id Software, right? Like those are going to be remembered. Like the Romero, you know, the John Carmack and John Romero are names that are going to be remembered for gaming.
I think when 50 years from now, when gaming has become to a point where it's in everyone's lives, right? I don't want to say the metaverse because fuck that.
No.
But when it becomes something that everyone in their life, because think about it, 50 years from now, a lot of us boomers, you know, we will be boomers by that point.
Oh, yeah.
A lot of us have played games. We're going to look at it totally different than the boomers of now, right? The boomers of now still think games are a joke. And I know there's some of you old farts out there that are really into gaming too, you know, the Atari heads and stuff like that. But as we get older, you know, we change society's view of certain things, you know, and I mean, you have to think that, yeah, gaming was slowly getting bigger and bigger over time. I think the first big sport was esports that really kind of pushed people into thinking, oh, games can be more than just a game, right? And then, you know, Minecraft and Fortnite and Roblox, like, as a lot of people cringe at those names, those games have brought people into the gaming world that probably never would have touched those things before. You know, granted, a lot of those are kids, but those kids are going to grow up and look at games differently than a lot of other people from even my era. Right. You know, when I was growing up, I didn't know many kids playing games, right? They were more kids that played card games that I knew, but there was maybe 3 of us that played video games. Everyone else was into sports, all that kind of stuff. And, you know, nowadays it's like every damn kid has played a game at least once. Even if it is just Fortnite, it's still a game, you know, and I think that's awesome. And I think that because so many people have an interest in games now, we're going to see much more artistic ways of making games. Even though, like, sometimes the avant-garde side of gaming gets a little weird and isn't seem like the most interesting game. Sometimes those weird games actually are kind of interesting.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm really excited for the future. I mean, even just playing games all my life, like recently I've been really wanting to make a game. And I mean, the problem with me is I'm not artistic in the sense that I'm like, oh, I can't sit here and draw cool images. So like, it would be me wanting to make more of like the gameplay of it. And there's so many different things I want to make. And I'm just like, oh man, I want to put this style into it. And I think of like some of these game creators, right? And I'm like, oh, what's their art style? What's their style? And I want to do something like that. And for me, that's when I realized like these games are a form of art.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like if there's creators out there that inspire you to either make something similar, you know, it's art, right?
Mm-hmm.
If a bake-off, if your cake is considered art, then a game is considered art.
That's true.
You know, like
yeah, food is art.
It's like, you know, a lot of things can be considered art. And if you are a pretentious asshole and think, oh, the only kind of art is like fine art, right? Like, oh, only impressionist, or, you know, with movies, like, oh, only the Coppola classics are art. It's like, there's so much more out there.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you got to broaden your view. And a lot of people who get into art, music scenes, who are pretentious like that, like they get stuck in their own little circle of music and art. And I know because I've had a lot of friends that get like that. And for me, I've always loved exploring and finding new things to enrich my mind.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's the other problem with games, that there's so many different styles of games out there that like it'd be hard to pinpoint art in those games. But with indie games, it's a little bit easier because if one looks cool to us with a really cool art style or graphic style, we can easily just be like, oh, that's art.
Right.
You know, but yeah. I'm off my soapbox now.
Well, actually, there is a pretty big industry that did want to counteract or counter what Roger Ebert actually said, and that is the Museum of Modern Art in New York City. They actually looked at this quote from Roger Ebert and said, no, you're wrong. Games can be art. And the MoMA has acquired quite a few games over the years, and now they are in the museum at being showcased as such, as art, which I think is really interesting. Now, the weird thing about this, though, is the games that they have acquired, I wouldn't necessarily consider them art games or good examples of an art style game or a game that represents art, which is a little funny, and it sounds a little counterintuitive to what we've been saying, right? But the games that they picked to acquire are critically acclaimed games or like high selling games or extremely popular games, right? It feels like they're kind of like they're missing the indie side of it, which makes sense because, you know, like they're only going to pay attention to the games that are worldly renowned, right? Whereas, like, because it's the same thing with the artwork. You only pay attention to the artwork that is known around the world. That's why you have in a museum like that, right? That's why the museum's so big. But, like, some of the games that they acquired, here's a little list of it, but, like, games like Pac-Man, Tetris, Another World, Myst, SimCity, or even The Sims, Katamari Damacy, which I think is really a funny one to put in there. But like EVE Online, Dwarf Fortress, Portal, like they've acquired these games, and apparently they're in talks of even acquiring Space War from 1962, one of the original games, which I think is really cool, and even Minecraft, which I think is interesting. Which I could see the appeal of Minecraft. I mean, I get it for like an emotional therapeutic sense. Like that's a very different way of looking at it. But like none of these games, in my opinion, really push that argument forward of like this is an art style that needs to be treated as such, right? Because I feel like there's much better examples of that. And like, for instance, one of the games that I've been thinking about ever since we saw this little quote here, was actually Grease. That game is beautiful. And I feel like
Mm-hmm.
it perfectly balances game and art. And I think that's the key here. And it does go against the argument. Like, I would totally see that if Ebert was given this game or shown it or it had it explained to him, he wouldn't consider it a game. So then, therefore, this game cannot be art, right? Like, he would declassify it because there isn't the stereotypical point system that is what he's expecting to see from a game. So like that's where his argument is coming from. And I think that's where it's getting so skewed and where it's being misrepresented, right? Like, Grease is a beautiful story and it's a very engaging game. Like, and it keeps you wanting to move forward. And it's just beautiful to look at, not just for the visuals, but just the little nuances in the untold story. It's not like you're just reading a book, right? Like, it's just a gorgeous title through and through. And the fact that it's, hand painted, watercolor, like everything about it is just a gorgeous, gorgeous title. But like, I feel like this definitely needs to be one of the things that gets classified under like games that are art. Like, this is, I think, a perfect one to really push that argument forward, or games under like similar to this style, at least. So another game that I would really consider to be an art form is one that I talk about way too much. And I'm sure some people can already guess what it's going to be, but it's Journey. Like, that game honestly is the first game that changed my view set of games themselves and what they can be, how they can deliver a story, how they can be engaging, all of it. The gameplay is gorgeous. The story is phenomenal. It's a great experience, and it's one that honestly still lives in my mind every single day. Every day that I think about games, I feel like that game pops up, or like I feel like I'm comparing that. Like, that has become like my comparison to other games as to where it lands, right? Is it an art game or is it just a game, right? And I feel like I don't know, there's so much behind that. Maybe it was due to the fact that when I played it, I was in a pretty dark time and I kind of needed something like that. And maybe that's why it stuck with me so much. But there's a lot of people who have had that same experience with this title. And there's actually a lot of books that have been written, or a lot of essays as well, about this game itself and what it was able to do to push the genre forward. I mean, I'm staring at a book right now that's called How Games Move Us, and it has Journey on the front cover, and Journey is the main game that they talk about, on a perfect example of how games can, motivate, how they can like make us react in emotional ways. And I think that's just a perfect example of another art game. Now, unfortunately, these two games did come out after Ebert passed, or like they weren't big enough to even reach his radar, I would assume, even if he was alive today, right? So like, and I feel like they completely counteract his argument, and it is a shame, in my opinion.
I knew you were going to talk about that.
I had to.
But, I mean, you're not wrong. Like, I think anytime people think, like, artsy games, they always think of, Journey. Anything from that game company, as they're called, or Annapurna, like, you just know it's going to be, like, art. Yeah. Kind of.
I think the next game I'm going to add to that list is probably Stray. Watch out.
Possibly.
Yeah.
We'll hear you talk about it for 3 weeks. Because you can just be a cat.
That's right. That's enough art for me. That's perfect.
Yeah. For me, I think a game that I played this year that really kind of changed my view a lot, especially puzzle games, because I feel like a lot of time puzzle games almost are always considered art games just because they make you think. I mean, I know that's not the best way of putting it, but it's easy to make a beautiful puzzle game, right? it's just hard to make a good puzzle game. So a lot of times these puzzle games kind of have a great idea, but they look kind of crappy, right? Or they look very basic. For me, Gorogoa is a very beautiful game that's hand-drawn and illustrated by Jason Roberts. And it actually won like the debut game of 2018 at BAFTA, right? And like it's gotten a lot of different awards, and it's a beautiful game. And the puzzles, like, it's not super difficult. You do have to think. You know, it's not like Portal where you can just keep shooting your portal on the wall and hoping the puzzle works, right? It's not physics-based. This game is just beautiful. And, I mean, it is still more of a game than a, work of art. But every still image on there is just so beautifully drawn that you can't tell me if someone looks at that and they're like, that, someone would say like, oh, that's not beautiful, or ew, that's, that wouldn't be art. Like, that game looks like art books that I've read. And it truly was a great game. I mean, for it being like short, which for puzzle games I think are beneficial, especially if they're under 4 hours long. Highly recommend that game if you want to feel fancy. Because I definitely felt fancy after playing that. Like, it made me happy. It made me want to look at more art. And, this, God, there's so many games now I could really go on about hand-drawn and how I think they all look like art. But going kind of in a different route, my other game that I wanted to talk about that I still haven't beaten, I think I'm very close though, because I've spent quite a amount of time in this, but it's a Manifold Garden.
Yeah,
it's a very beautiful game. Very Etcher inspired game, because it's just, the steps leading everywhere and going up and down. Like, I'm a big fan of that style. I have like 3 books in my closet just based on that style, because I love it. And it's another puzzle game, physics puzzles this time, which, good or bad. I know some people love them, some people hate them, but the game's really cool. And, you could take so many like stills of that game, just be like, show it to someone, and they're going to think, oh, this is just, someone was on Photoshop or something, or Illustrator, like graphic design. Like, when you look at still images of it and you don't look at the things that you interact with, like, it just looks like someone painted this. Like, it's crazy how good the game looks. And I know there's a lot of other games out there too that with still shots, they look like just, a still image, still art. But this game is beautiful. And I know there's a lot of other beautiful games out there that do that too. And I think for me, that's how I kind of see the art in games, is that I'm someone who loves to take photos in games. Photo mode, even if they don't have photo mode, like, I try to find a way of getting a good shot. And so many games recently are just so beautiful, or they have such inspirational shots in a sense that it makes me like escape, I guess you could say, that you could really see the art in almost any game for the most part. And yeah, there's a lot of junk out there, but I think it's something we should really look at. And like you said before, like, it's such a young medium that we're probably not going to get that kind of opinion for a long time. If games are just being accepted kind of now in the mainstream as much as they are, it'll be a while. It'll probably be another few decades before people kind of treat it the same way. But, that's fine. People, the creators who are making works of art right now, like, they're at least treated well, right? They're highly regarded, and, they're famous in the communities. But I don't know. I'm I'm really excited to see what people's artistic values go into the upcoming games, because every year I see all these indie titles come out and I'm just like, damn, this looks cool. Damn, this style is different, but I love it. Like, I don't know. Every year I'm happy to see what's new, and it's exciting.
Yeah, I agree. The question of what is art has been something that has been discussed for so long, ever since art was even invented, right? And the people who really pushed those boundaries in the early ages, like it takes a while for that recognition to happen. Like even impressionist art was looked at as not art for so long. And then it got slowly more and more accepted. And then now that's like looked at as, traditional art. Whereas before it wasn't even art. And then every time like a new art genre appeared, it challenged that idea of what is art, and it was looked at as not art for a long period of time. Cubist style painting, right? Like that was not art for a long time. People looked at it as garbage because they couldn't make heads or tails of it. Abstract art, right? Like there's all kinds of stuff like that. And it's interesting to see the growth of the medium itself and the art form, right? But now we're venturing into this whole new category of mixing art and technology and saying like the final product can't be art whenever it is, right? Whether you're doing it with a brushstroke or a keystroke, you're making something out of nothing. You're creating a memorable experience. You're impacting someone in a positive or negative way, which art does, right? Like it could impact someone negatively as well. Like you're telling a story just like the novelists or the poets out there do with their tales, right? Like it's so weird because if you break apart a game to its core components, you have screenwriters, you have designers, you have like all this stuff, you have programmers, and each individual one could be looked at as an artist creating something beautiful that could be considered art. But for some reason, when we put all of that together, it's not art anymore. And it just makes no sense to me. It's the perfect collaboration of a multitude of art forms. So how is it not art? How can it not be? Right? And it's bizarre. It makes no sense to me. But I don't know. Maybe it's just frame of reference. Maybe it's just age. Maybe it's nostalgia speaking and the fact that we grew up playing these games and we have a different type of appreciation for them. I mean, of course we appreciate art, or we appreciate games as a whole. I mean, we've been doing this podcast for like almost a couple of years now, right? Like, of course we have an appreciation for them and a different mindset than most people probably have. But I don't know. I'm excited to see the future, to see what else comes out, what else pushes the boundaries, and to see what actually I'd be so excited to see the day that, an actual designer gets the recognition that they deserve in an art book. Like that's going to be fascinating. Or can't wait to see video game studies as like an art 103 class or whatever the hell, right? Like how cool would that be? But
that would be cool.
I feel like that's going to happen in the future. It's going to be a thing, or it's going to be an option for people to learn about. I mean, shoot, you can get a accredited degree right now in game art. Like I have, and so it's a thing. Like it's a part of our everyday life now. It's an acceptable career path. It's all of that. And you are a designer no matter what. So if you are a designer out there making games and someone ever tells you you're not an artist, ignore them. Don't get angry and confront them. That's the wrong thing to do because they're just going to create more enemies that way. But ignore what they're saying and just know in your heart, you are an artist. You are creating. You're making something. And you know what? Even if that person is so negative about what you made, you impacted them. And that's exactly what art does. So kudos. Good job. But with that, I think that's going to do it for us this week. Thank you guys so much for listening in. And we will talk to you all next week with some more wonderful game ideas. And to really, really drive home the point that games are, in fact, art. But until then, bye for now.